I always wondered how the greater civilizational collapses happen, and not just the fall of empires and the rise of new empires, but the bigger civilizational collapses, sort of the 6,000 year cycle after humanity forgets ancient art, the building of huge monolithic structures from stone is the only thing that remains. And then we ponder on how they had some technology that we don't have yet, right? It's almost like civilization gets rebuilt from the bottom up again every 6,000 years. And I always thought, like, how could that happen? Is it something biblical? Is it something else? Whatever you believe in, right? It could be major shifts in, the temperature, or aliens, or whatever you want to believe, right? And then it just collapses down. And I think that's where we kind of make the mistake, because we're thinking that civilizations have to collapse because something cosmic happens, something major, right? It's almost like an act of God of restarting it, right? But it's almost feels like it's just a natural succession of events where people lose everything, in the sense of they lose their mind, they lose their faith, their physical health. It's just a progressional degradation of the human spirit. And they're just saying in Hungarian that, the dog becomes rabid when his life is too good. It's almost like that, when we lived through many, many cycles of empires, always trying to refine how we build up the next one or the previous one. We learned from the mistakes of the previous one, trying to do it better and better. And to be honest, like, life on Earth has never been easier in the last, couple of thousand years, probably. When if we look at, civilization wise, even there are these cyclical downturns, right, between empires, or dark ages, or name them whatever you want. Usually another empire picks up the crumbs, right? I mean, we have Roman structures still in Europe. The United States has mimicked the architecture of the Romans, right? And they learned a lot of stuff from the Greeks, and so on and so forth. And they themselves from the Egyptians. And the Eastern countries as well, right? They have their own little cycles, but these are just natural progressions. But I'm thinking about the major collapses where we move back to the Stone Age. And kind of the death of the monarch, right, reminded me of how things have been progressively getting worse in the last 100, 200 years when it comes to literature or art, right? If you take a look at the latest She-Hulk movie or whatever, of course I won't, but the memes are everywhere, right? How does that compare to Shakespeare? How does that compare to the great ancient arts, right? How does that compare to the Enlightenment era? The sculptures. Have we ever produced anything of any significance in the last 50 years? What do we have to show for ourselves? Tall steel buildings that melt away. Melt away, right? With glass. I was always wondering, like, why don't we just build it from rock and just like the pyramids, right? And we would at least have something to show for whenever from 6,000 years from now somebody's digging something up. I think the ancients, whoever they were, and however tall they were, they at least left us something to ponder about, you know. They showed us that they understood the celestials, right? Do we have something like that? Have we ever built something like that in the last 50 years? Right? Make that 100, make that 200 years. Will people from 12,000 years from now, will they ever remember who we were? I mean, these are things to think about as the cycles turn between empires. But I do believe within the next 500 years something major will happen. I mean, that we're definitely on that course. We're definitely on that course. You can see it just from the last couple of 100 years from written history. That always changes, of course. So, yeah, definitely different times. But maybe if we pull back a little bit from the next 500 years and just think about the next couple of months, I think we're due for a major event, whatever you want to call it. I don't think this time it will happen in September, but probably early October or definitely before the end of the year. It seems like things are just building up for a big release moment where you can blame anything on it. You know, the collapse of the markets, the collapse of everything. Could be war related, could be something else. I don't want to speculate or make up stuff here, but I definitely feel that way. Let me know if you feel that way. There's a reason why. There's a reason why the papacy, right? The Pope is calling back all its quote unquote ill-gotten gains, and it's gonna store it in the Vatican, right? If you can read Latin, then you can read the papal letter, I guess. So there's a reason for that, you know. We don't know the reason for it, but my guess is it has to do something with a financial, let's just say, happening. Let's just say happening. And yeah, I sure do hope you have something outside of the system, you know. I mean, at this point, whatever that is, it's better. But I think we should be coming up with alternative solutions. As much as I don't necessarily like where the crypto space has went in the last maybe 2 years, definitely last year, or yeah, last 2 3 years, I would say. I think the idea had something behind it, right? It definitely showed the Zoomer generation that hey, anything can be money. If nothing else, at least it made you question what money is, you know, and how you can do that, or what barter is. The thing is that I think it's definitely the water is so muddied right now that there's gonna be a couple ones or something being pushed, or even it sort of like half made or gave birth to the new era of CBDCs that might be coming, right? It almost like legitimizes it. Oh, well, you want these smart wallets? Well, we can have the actual true smart wallet of of governed by one entity, which defeats the whole purpose of decentralized currency. But whatever. People fall for the lamest tricks, and I mean, it's not their fault probably at this point. It's just how you've been raised, I guess. So, boy, do I sure really hope some people have something outside of the system. And that doesn't have to be digital currency, that doesn't have to be something that is very high tech, but I sure hope we have some ways of dealing with each other through barter. The issue is with that is I don't see people using it right now. It's always like sometime in the future, if something collapses, then I'll do this with all of this stuff that I have stored up. But I feel like you need to exercise that right now, you know. If you're not already, you know, sending silver coins or whatever to your people, to whoever you want to do business with, to or just content creators, right? Those who have been really, really deplatformed, right? That may share some ideas that you support, whatever. If you're not using it there, if you're not using outside of the system transactions there, do you really think you're gonna use it later on? Like, what will it take really for you to start with that? What will it take to, explore, I don't know, some privacy crypto or something like that you truly hold, not just, oh, you bought it through an app and you think you own it, but like having the actual public and private key for it, right? And using that. So I'm thinking all about this because we have to at some point, peacefully step away from the systems that take us into the direction that we may not want to go. I mean, the least the least you can do is, at least start stepping out of the system. I mean, so many things have happened in the last weeks, that whether that could be, deplatforming, or that could be outright banning people from the banking system because they hold like views that could be like controversial. I would understand if they're dangerous, if they're a menace to society, but like, I excuse my language, but total idiots who you just don't like, you suddenly have, you know, the right to push them to the edge of society. I mean, that's sort of like a really big red flag for things to come. And as long as it's not you, you're fine with it. As long as you still disagree with whoever was pushed out there, you're fine with it. You know, what happened to the American experience and what happened to the American spirit of, you know, I disagree with you, but I'm gonna fight for your right to disagree. What happened to that? We talk about American exceptionalism. Well, that's American. That would be an American exceptionalism from the rest of the empires that came before us, right? If we lose, if we lose all of that, are we still America? You know, they say the idea of America, and America is just an idea. They say I don't necessarily agree with that, but like we're even losing that, the American idea. You know, we're getting shoehorned into becoming the enemies that we once fought. One boot at a time, either from the left or from the right the next day or the next 4 years. So, so where do you think we're heading? I talk about how the collapse of the Soviet Union that, I lived through as a young person was bad in the sense of we came from bad to worse and then to good, and now we're getting back to worse again. But like even during the Soviet times, corruption at high levels were, I would say, not as bad as what we have right now. Yeah, I'm really thinking about this, but the corruption, the level of corruption that we see now, even then you would have to hide it. You would have to really hide it from the people. Because think about it, like many people didn't like communism and they were like just forcefully living underneath it. But many people did, or some people did. Your own people, I guess, if you were a communist leader. And even from them you had to hide your corruption, because just because you were communist or quote unquote communist as a communist leader, your followers, just because they were communists, they would have not went away, or they would have not went along with absolute total blatant corruption that we have seen now in the likes of, let's just say, leaders who who know how to trade, always trade the stock market to win, right? Or the total outright corruption that happens in some of the agencies, right? I mean, we always had that, but you had to put up a facade at least, right? And that facade eventually was so heavy that the lower level of, perpetrators in the secret police in Romania or so on, they even got disgusted, right? That they had to put up a facade. Like during the lockdowns in some of these countries, right? A year ago, 2 years ago, who knows, right? It's interesting that they came out to some of these people to arrest them for absolute idiotic reasons. And you could see on their faces that some of them were ashamed that they are doing this. They would rarely quit, but they would go along, but you could see that they're not happy about, that's not what they signed up for. So you had that feeling even in Soviet era or in communist Romania, when, well, at least some of the people who were ideologically still communist, right, and they were doing their jobs and oppressing the people or whatever, you could see that they were not always happy about it. There were always some that were complete drones. But right now, it's almost like people are boasting or happy about it. So many people are just spiteful and hateful if you follow social media or any social media, that something tragic happens and there's always this layer of the population who's there to mock the misery of others just because they disagree with that politically. I mean, even under communism we had bigger social cohesion, right? I mean, especially under Ceausescu, speak whatever you want of the guy. And I definitely have something to say about him. Like, even during those times, if you were in school, every morning you had to sing the national communist anthem. You put your hand over your heart. You would love your country. It wasn't the country that was 20 years ago, 50 years ago, before communism. It was a different country, right? It was now a communist country, but you had to love that communist country. You were forced to love it. Communism isn't what people now think it was. I see many commenters or whatever, people idealize their version of communism in their head, and they project that to Romania or Russia or whatever they think that was communist or close to the communist country that they believe in their head. And man, it was nothing like that. It was nothing like that. As I said before, the it's all about archetypes and which archetypes can rule. And people fall in love with the forever revolutionary spirit, you know. But as soon as communism is achieved, it doesn't it doesn't need that any longer in its own country, and it pushes that out to either a neighboring country or some other country that it is at quote unquote ideological war with. So there's a purge that happens after communism is reached in a country, where the people who are stuck in the mentality of the forever revolution or fall in love with communism just because it's revolutionary, you know, aspect of it, those are disposed of. And rightly so. I mean, from the aspect of the leaders, of the newfound leaders, they don't want you anymore, right? You have served your purpose. Either you change or get merged into the father, right? The father archetype, or you're no longer needed. So social cohesion was very high, you know. Yes, you were afraid if you did something, or if you said something that would be against the system, you could be charged. But it was always like you never knew who those people were or who would be ratting on you. And there was a level of distrust. Yet somehow social cohesion was still strong. Like, in the sense, like, factories had sports teams, right? Think about your company now, sponsoring a stadium, and after work every Friday, your company gets to play soccer or football or whatever with some other company every single Friday, right? And there's almost like a camaraderie between all of you, even if you're suffering, even if you're suffering, in many other ways. It's almost like a camaraderie in suffering. You're suffering together, and you would definitely keep quiet about your political opinions, but there were these outlets or ways how you could push out your frustrations, right? In something maybe creative or at least healthy, And if you think about some of these movements today, very, very unhealthy movements of, well, let's just say, directions of the body that, I mean, I don't know how to say it to make it YouTube friendly, but like, people don't respect their body anymore to the point that they eat to death or they pierce themselves to where they're no longer recognizable. So that was not allowed during communism. You would be totally shamed. You would be totally shamed if you would do that. Absolutely. I mean, some of you people are totally delusional of what was life under communism. It was not the liberation that you people think of. That was only ever achieved under communism, not never on capitalism. It was only ever achieved under capitalism and the libertarian state, which it's all fine and dandy, but I mean, it's what you think that you could get away with or you would be supported under top-down rule, once that is actually implemented on its face, it would be very different from what you think. So I'm saying this because what I want to get back to is, after the fall, we had it good in the sense of social relations, you know. Countries were not on the brink of civil wars, you know. There were definitely elements of, you know, retribution, in the sense of, okay, we suffered enough, now let's get the people who made us suffer, that sort of stuff. But it was very limited. It was very limited, and it was not a grand scale move, you know, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on your point of view. But the pure hate that is present between men and women, you know, just because of different opinions, it was not there. So in that sense, whatever's coming, man, it's gonna be totally different, the likes we've never seen before. So what you take away from this? What you take away from this is, go and live in the place where you think you have the best chance for survival. And I'm saying that political survival. Go, and location is the first, one of the first, if not the first priority that you should think about. So I'm thinking the political jurisdiction that you live in, you know, the counties, the states, very important, that you live in, or countries even. You really have to think this through. Or have an immediate second plan, you know, have an immediate plan B. Because it's gonna get interesting. This pandemic stuff was just kids play. This was just one of the stress tests. I'm thinking not even the final ones. If you haven't learned any lessons, then I don't know when you're gonna learn. Yeah. I think the economic side is just really the symptom of a morally bankrupt society. You know, that's just a symptom. The cause is not economics, it's not numbers, it's not printed money. All of that is just like the fever that you can feel when someone's sick, you know. Some root cause is there, and it has to be moral, you know. And you can point like, okay, who are the groups that are doing this, or who are the groups of doing that, but it's almost like pointing out the fungi, you know. Oh, look at the fungi, or look at the disease, instead of yes, it's there, it's eating away a layer, but that only shows up in an unhealthy flesh, you know. And you can root out all the fungi, it will just reappear in a different form if a society is morally bankrupt. It has the exact same amount of fungi that it needs to show you where the problem is. So that's something to think about. And how do you fix this, you know? How do you fix this? I think you fix yourself. You clean your room. Well, you start whatever you can, but definitely try to participate less in the mess that's around you. Definitely start there. I do believe the macrocosm is sort of a reflection of our inner inner state, of our inner spirit. And we let this happen. We let this happen because we compromised. As people, you look away and you let it happen because it's not happening with you. You know, falling in love with life, making life too good is probably a sin somewhere. Yeah. Yeah, I'm living for the whole life experience. I think it's BS. It's absolute BS. Living for life itself is circular. It's it's circular logic where it's definitely idiotic to say the least. If the purpose of something is itself, it has no purpose. But yeah, that's what we're being sold. Try to gather as much Instagram pictures of you being interesting places or whatever. Gain more life experience, gain more this, gain more that, but then you don't even believe in an afterlife or reincarnation or whatever. So you just collected a bunch of crap that you throw away at the end. So what's the purpose of it? You have to think about that. I think we can bring it back, but there's just some things that have to rot away, unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever. And we have to save what's salvageable, you know. I think interesting times are definitely ahead, both on the short term and on the long term. And if you're gonna be wasting too much time in trying to save those who do not want to be saved instead of just inspiring people to save themselves, I think you might be wasting your time. So, as an era comes to an end with the death of the Queen, I wonder what will come next. We'll see. Stay tuned.